And by then, as the fur trade down in the lower 48, if you will, was starting to decline, all of a sudden it opened up trade with the Blackfoot Confederation, who resided up in Canada. So for 5 years, from 1869 to 1874, it was wide open for the whiskey traders out of Fort Benton to take whiskey up into the Canadian provinces. There was no security forces, there was no law enforcement, and trade whiskey to the Indians for furs and so on.
The whiskey trade in this area, it was the #1 trading item for the Indians. The Indians always believed in altered states, and when booze came along, or whiskey, that got them to another state, and they felt it was almost their right and privilege to get drunk. So once they found the white man's firewater, it was something they craved, and would trade almost anything for them, from furs to their clothes, their horses, whatever they could get for whiskey.
So there was a real wild element here, and it started with the fur trade with the Indians. That was two cultures sharing each other. You know, the traders almost all married or had white wives, and with all that big series of forts that were along here, there was a great interplay. And like in Fort Benton, there was never a shot fired in anger at the Indians, you know, from the fort. So it was a real great thing. Then with the gold days, when that came through, then it got nasty, and a lot of the people, they didn't care about the Indians, were just something in the way at that time instead of something to help commerce. So it got to be, you know, really, really bad at that point, you know, and with massacres and Baker's Massacre and just bad things.
As things developed after 1860, in the 1860s, this was a very wild and woolly town. Almost all the buildings were built out of wood, and as a consequence, there were many fires. Everything was open 24/7. I mean, you had a bunch of roustabouts off the steamboats up here, you had fur traders, you had Indians, you had mountain men, if you will. You had all the breadth of humanity that you can think of coming through here. And as a consequence, you had bars or taverns, you had bordellos, you had opium dens, and you had just all kinds of activity going on in Fort Benton.
Well, the bloodiest block was basically a block of bars, brothels. It was at a very lawless time in this 1860s and 70s when this took place, and at one period of time for about 2 years, it averaged about every 2 weeks there were about 3 murders, and someone with gold in the 1860s would be killed. If there was a winning guy at the table, would go out, maybe inebriated a little bit, and someone would knock him in the head and throw him in the river, steal his money. It was this type of a very, very wild atmosphere.
Once we got past these gold rush days, and during these gold rush days, I should say, in the 1860s, there got to be a great demand for beef. So a lot of these gold miners decided, well, instead of digging gold, we'll raise beef and sell it to the miners and make our money that way. And it actually worked out quite good. And there's a number of these where the families are 5th, 6th generation around here now. And that, you know, there's not a lot of them, but there's quite a few of them. But it was a pretty good deal. We, by this time, we had pretty well wiped out the bison for the robe trade, and then it went to the hide trade, where you use the hides for the Industrial Revolution, all that. So the bison were almost all slaughtered. Well, these ranchers saw all this free grass with no more bison on it. The Indians had been pushed off and were being pushed off to reservations. And so they saw this as great opportunity. So the money to be made was incredible. A lot of that was done by investors from Europe and back east that never did see it. And about this time too, like say when the railroad started hitting this country, then it became very important. So we ended up having lots and lots and lots of cattle in here. But there was a lot of money made, and there was you know, and it helped build this area, this region, and our institutions. And it during the cattle, you know, then we started getting a lot of white women in. We started getting our churches in. We started having our culture that is predominant today. But it was a really beautiful, colorful era.
And when I came to Fort Benton, I knew about the community beforehand, but I didn't realize what a great community it is. Rich in history, very tight knit. There are old families here that are still here from the 1860s. The information and history that they have is very good. Camaraderie and friendships that have developed over the years, and just being a Fort Bentonite and being a little bit arrogant because we're one of the oldest communities in the state, has been really good. Raising a family here, man, coming from a larger city, I can't believe that the opportunities that my kids had in the school systems here, and the sports, and the Old West flavor that Fort Benton has, the wild and scenic river down below, the Lewis and Clark Trail running through, the cattle days, the fur trade days, and just a great bunch of people living in the town that believe in the town and are still here. And anybody that grows up here and goes and leaves always brings their family back to show them where they came from. So Fort Benton is my home. I've lived here over 40 years now, and I can't imagine living any other place.